There is such a build-up to the High Holy Days for me. For as long as I can remember, even prior to my life as a congregational rabbi, the arrival of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur came with anticipation, excitement, and anxiety. Because they always coincide with the beginning of the school year, and my year has always been based on the academic calendar, I associate the High Holy Days with a rush to cook and bake, with the purchase of school supplies, with the beginning of classes, writing sermons, papers, tests, my own, Joe's, our children's. As empty nesters now, the High Holy Days have lost some of the anxiety associated with them, it is true. This is a welcome relief that I could not have possibly imagined when our kids were young and we used to eat dinner on Erev Rosh Hashanah and on Kol Nidre at 12 noon to make sure that we sat together before we went to services. Those were days when there was not a lot of energy left over. But I must say, I miss some of that excitement and the adrenaline rush that came with parents and grandparents coming from in town or out of town to visit, big holiday dinners with everyone present, our children coming home from college with any number of friends to join us at our home and then at synagogue. There was something different about getting to the finish line, to today, the day after Yom Kippur, during those years. For me, this is the definition of melancholy, which I looked up in multiple dictionaries and was actually surprised to see it described and defined in a number of different ways. Melancholy, a depression of spirit, sad, gloomy, dejected. Melancholy, a mood disorder characterized by a sense of deep sadness with no obvious cause. Melancholy, a prolonged state of sorrow. These definitions took me by surprise. I have never thought of melancholy in quite so extreme terms. And rather than a definition in words, what came to mind for me instead is an exemplar, a person. No one knew melancholy better than King Solomon. He had riches, he had wives, he had beautiful palaces to live in, and yet he understood the cycle of life, perhaps more than any other person in biblical history. It is for these reasons that we study the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, written by King Solomon during the festival of Sukkot, a time to bid farewell to the summer, a time to say goodbye to the excitement of the new year, a time to begin to prepare ourselves for the cold months ahead. Arthur Waskow calls the book of Ecclesiastes a wintry book because it was written in King Solomon's latter years and reflects a summing up of a cycle of life that has revolved its way through joy and sorrow, war and peace, joy and boredom. This captures the multifaceted nature of the melancholy that, to me, feels a bit more familiar. The beautiful but weak desert dwelling, the Sukkah, that we are commanded to build immediately following the close of Yom Kippur, too, is a symbol of the fragility of life, the vulnerability that we have to the outside world and its elements, and the harvest, which for farmers represents a time of great anxiety and concern. The brilliant colors of autumn stand as a paradox to us as well, for we know too soon these gorgeous harvest hues will give way to the black, white, and gray of winter. This time of year, with the quick changes in temperature and frequent rains that are supposed to come, bring a sense of melancholy even to the most optimistic among us. And this year, with the events of our world and the settling into what some call the new normal, many of us wonder what the future will really hold. The familiar words of the book of Ecclesiastes remind us that we are prone to events that are greater than ourselves. We are just small creatures on God's expansive planet. A season is set for everything, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to slay and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to wail and a time to dance, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time for war and a time for peace. And yet, even with these fatalistic statements of existence, we are told Sukkot is a time for happiness. We are commanded to be happy. It is Zman Simchatenu, a time of our rejoicing. In spite of it all, while we are looking at our own fragility, square on. Sukkot pushes us to actually find reasons for Zman Simchatenu, 4 times for rejoicing. The magnificent harvest moon that will be full on Erev Sukkot, Monday evening, the rains that will prepare the ground for spring, the bounty of our own tables and families. These are reasons for Zman Simchatenu, a time of rejoicing. Even in the shadow of some of the fall tragedies that have occurred over the years, September 11th, October 7th, others, even in the wake of illness and death in our close circles, we are still commanded to celebrate Sukkot and trust that renewal is possible and that it will come. Melancholy for King Solomon and the book of Ecclesiastes can be a creative challenge to us. How does each one of us deal with the movement of time and the mixed emotion that accompany the passing years? How do we see ourselves in the harvest of our lives? What does it mean to enjoy the bounty of what we have lived and worked for? Rather than the dictionary, I found some people's descriptions of melancholy that resonated a bit more clearly for me. Melancholy, the weight of your past emotions on your chest during a quiet, tired, longing reflection. Or, I think of melancholy as sadness, but nothing so deep and dark as depression or super painful state. It is reflective, being sad by remembering when you were sad but overcame it. Or a crinkled nostalgia, content in being in your sad moment rather than drowning in it. Or finally, melancholy, a sky during dusk covered with a thick purple layer of clouds. The air is not cold. You can see yourself, and you can also see the horizon in this barren but non-threatening landscape called the world. It is ultimately up to each of us to define melancholy for ourselves and move through it. We may not be able to control whether the seasons come and go, when we live and when we may die, but we are presented choices in every other area of Ecclesiastes' conception of life. It is up to us when it is a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to slay and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up. It is up to us when it is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to wail and a time to dance. May our celebrations of the upcoming festival of Sukkot be filled with the knowledge that although we are only human, we are also at the same time the crown of God's creation. May the work of our hands, whether it be outdoors in our gardens or in our attempts to improve the world, bring us joy, meaning, and wholeness. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Be this God's will.